Alex, I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit and just ask Alex. I was just curious. When you were talking about the cloud offerings out there and all the money that Amazon got, holy cow, for AWS. What is your understanding of like on the iSeries side of things? Like, is anyone offering cloud services for Power 9?
Yeah, Google is launching an IBMI cloud service, and I think Azure is too, right? I think they're partnering with SkyTap right now. So yeah, we're starting to see IBMI public cloud services start to hit the market. I don't think it's very widespread at this point, but it's starting.
Alex, do you know of any providers that have like test beds of IBMI, as opposed to signing a contract for a full, partition, for lack of a better term? Do you know of somebody who lets people really test out their apps on IBMI in the cloud?
Besides SkyTap, not really. I imagine it's probably going to start to be a service that's rolled out, but I'm not really aware of any of those at this point.
Thanks. Chuck, you had some other questions for Alex there?
That was my core one. I don't want to like step on anyone else. I'm sure there's a bunch of questions and we have limited time.
So this is the first question for the panel. So we've seen a number of different technologies, different stakeholders, vendors, end users, and the and the theme was rebooting the supply chain. Obviously, we know we're in this difficult time. What would each of you say is the first step? Really, is it literally to take measurements, or are there some? I don't want to use the term quick fix because that implies something wrong. I'm talking about an initial step that you can take to react quickly to this new changed environment. Michael, is your audio on? Yeah. Okay. Chuck, take it while Michael figures out this.
I think Mike's back. Nope.
Oh,
nope.
Close.
Nope. Sorry. So the core part of the question was?
What's the first step that our customers should do to begin to react quickly and be nimble to respond to all these changed conditions? Which, I mean, if people were still sitting tight.
I mean, right. So that is the key. I mean, nimble is certainly the key. So I forgot who spoke earlier, and they were talking about like you've had that opportunity to see how your supply chain, what it really looks like, right, in this tough environment. So now you've gotten this kind of free education, although nothing's been free as we're all weathering the storm here, and you could see some of those weak areas. So I think it's the number one thing is really identifying those areas, and I think you learned from a number of people today, some different actions you can take to help mitigate some of those problems that you're experiencing. So it's not a problem going forward. So and that helps you out really multiple ways. I mean, obviously you're going to save money and get things done hopefully quicker, right, and more efficiently, and you'll be more prepared. You'll be kind of poised and ready. When and if, hopefully this never happens again, but if it does, you'll be ready to hit the ground running and just flick a switch and off you go.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about being ready for the next time. And believe it or not, 3M was actually ready because they had gone through a shortage of PPE and masks backwards. I think it was the SARS epidemic or the MRSA, whatever, there were pandemics before, nothing obviously as global as this one. And they said, you know what, we're going to set up production lines literally in mothballs, but they're ready to go in case we get this otherworldly demand. And sure enough, they were able to quintuple or whatever, some huge improvement in their production. Another vignette, for lack of a better term. I saw an interview with an executive from Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. Caesar's Palace had never closed in all their years. They never closed. So they had no standard operating procedure for shutting down the casino. Okay, so they had to create they had to turn off the big screens in the book room. They had to take the cash right out of the machines, take the cash into the vault, empty the vault, go to the bank, etc. But one thing that they did realize was this also represented an opportunity for them, and that was that they were able to do certain modernization projects on the casino floor that they were never able to do because it's always been, live 24/7. It's Vegas. So, and I think there's something to be said there that our customers, again, if they don't, because there's a stay-at-home order, they don't have everybody in the warehouse, but they can get certain key personnel into the warehouse to do certain investments that take advantage of that requirement. Terry, thank you for joining.
It's good to be here. Sorry, I'm a little bit late.
That's good.
I guess you guys were ahead of schedule.
Yeah, moved along pretty nicely. But I had started off with the question, which was, what should people do? Number one, that first step. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say the first thing you want to do is look at your data. Is your data in shape, if you will? Is your data organized in such a way so that you can be adaptable and pivot? Can you gain access to new distribution networks? One example, thinking about the food service industry pivoting to service retail grocery, right? There's a whole infrastructure in place for food service, and executives on both sides are trying to say, hey, we'd like to help and use the distribution facilities, right, and redirect items. But you have the question of, well, how do you identify things? Can you really sell the same things? Are they packaged for point of sale? Those different challenges there. Are the product attributes such that they can be traded? So being standards compliant means having your data in a certain shape that it's already ready to go and interoperable. Another point I would make would be relate to produce, where there's a move from having a generic UPC, if you will, that's agnostic to the source company, to having a company-specific UPC on produce. And so that's very interesting as well, because now you can say, all right, this particular tomato or this particular item came from this company, and now I can manage recall and traceability much more clearly and understandably in that case. So I would say it starts with the data, and it starts with being standards compliant in that way, so you can be interoperable.
Thank you. Alex, what do you think the first steps companies should do to react and somehow respond to these special challenges of COVID-19?
Yeah, it's tough. I think it has to be. I think it has to be an all hands on deck moment, right? You have to do everything you can to keep operations moving, assuming that you're an essential business and you haven't been told by the government to shut down. And from that point of view, you have to do everything that you can just to try to make your orders. I think it's probably a bad time to embark on huge projects, just because we're going to be heading into a pretty poor economy here probably for the next 6 months to a year, and that's, who knows what that's going to do to your business, right? So maybe it's not a good time. I had a chance to interview a gentleman at FICO who's in charge of supply chain there, and he said, well, the companies that had invested in AI modeling to optimize their supply chain, they actually were able to adapt fairly well to the chaos, that we all saw with the grocery stores and retailers and consumer goods supply chain, right? But he says, well, it's a pretty bad time to try to implement that right now. right? There's just so many other priorities. Just trying to keep the day to day from overwhelming you. So on the other hand, it might be a good time to embark upon some projects that have been kind of sitting by the wayside for a while, as long as they're not too as long as they don't impact customers in a big way, right? Like there's the point that the roads are empty right now, so why shouldn't all the construction workers go out and do all their road maintenance right now, right? So if the traffic on the box or your IT systems are low, well, it might be a good time to do some of that work at this time, but probably not a great time to embark upon an AI journey.
Actually, so that's a follow-up question for you, and that is that didn't this from whatever March 13th forward, didn't it throw a complete monkey wrench to that data set? I mean, what does the system do when it sees a data set it never saw before?
Yeah, exactly. You can't trust the data, right? If you're using some model to predict what you should make or ship, or make, to prepare to ship to your customers, that is probably going to be out of whack at this point, right? And then going forward for the next 6 months, you can't use the current data set to predict, what you should make in the future, right? So you can't just trust the output of the machine learning models. You got to have a human in the loop to look at the data and to tell you what it really means.
Thank you, Terry. What first steps do you think customers should take to kind of be ahead of the curve and be a little more proactive in terms of their nimbleness to respond to this unusual economic situation that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I agree with the gentleman that talked about data and the reliability of data. What is predictive truly and what is not, at this point in time? We don't know. This is a unique situation in a whole new world. But I think that you look at your data, and then I would think that the next thing is you have to look at your personnel. What is the right size? What do I need to function at what level? Those are the two things that you start with. I think that things like equipment, as an equipment manufacturer and as a tag manufacturer, we're way far down the line. You have to start with the data, then you have to get some sort of idea of what's predictive as to your performance. And you have to understand what your personnel load is going to be and what the sales performance is going to be, I think, before you can start thinking about anything else in terms of systems to control all of that. Because there's absolutely no way. I mean, we rely on data just like CYBRA does or anybody else that's providing a solution does. We rely on hard data that has given hard experience to customers. And, so I think that I definitely agree that you need to have a certain amount of time and a certain amount of data in to get some form of predictable performance analytics before you do anything. And then once you do, then you move toward what the priority is. And that also includes personnel.
Thank you. Chuck, you've already had this challenge, so you can share what. In other words, we've been approached by a pretty large number of customers who they primarily ship through carton loads, pallet loads, and all of a sudden their customers say to them, "Hey, now you got to ship direct to consumer," right? And that all of a sudden, instead of sending 24 pairs of shoes, you're sending one pair of shoes. How do they inject, for lack of a better term, a small order like that, and how do they process it, through the system where they're not set up to do that now?
Yeah, so they start off in basically like a vast station or vast area where they'll start off handling these smaller orders. So the eaches, as we call them, right? which is fine at first, right? Because it's like, all right, well, we got this new business or quote unquote new business, and we wanted to shipping directly to homes, one or two items at a time. And that's okay because you're happy to make that customer happy. What they find further down, once they're getting more and more orders, is like that one VAS station may not be enough, and like the overhead, the employees' time, and all that. Like you start doing the math, it's like, wow, we're losing money on some of these deals, and that's where some of the automation that we talked about today really comes in. So I mean, certainly, on the labeling form side, we all talk about like the drop ship forms, the packing list, and the labels and all that, and that helps speed things up. That duplex printer speeds things up, right? Because you don't have to like fold a packing list for one order, right, and stick it in a little pouch and stick it on the side of a box. Instead, you can duplex print on a thermal printer and just stick that one label on there, and that has everything on it. So that's helpful too. But in the other area, it comes, RFID is playing a role too, where it's identifying these individual items as they're going out. So and you can help streamline that process. So that's what I've seen with accounts. I know some of the other gentlemen may have some other views on it, and I welcome their thoughts.
A follow-up. How long did it take you to implement the print transformer to be able to change, in other words, there's a stream of orders coming, and this one's going to that person from, it's from shipped from website A to customer one. Next order is shipped from website B, goes to customer two, etc., and just constantly going back and forth like that. So so print transformer is one of the options within Markmagic. So and to answer your question, it's all about maybe a minute is all it takes. Really?
So it's basically where you create conditions or rules and tests within the format itself. You just make your format smart. So hey, if you were printing these labels or these forms before for these cartons, and we can actually look at the data as it's coming through, and it says it's going to a residential address, right? Maybe there's an R there in the data. Then we automatically can switch the way it prints, and also where it prints. So instead of going on this big system printer here, in the major warehouse floor, it can go over to this vast station and it come out on the smaller printer, and off you go. So making that change is actually really simple. I think that for us anyway, I mean that's our business. But the hard piece, I think, is within the warehouse itself and just using your space, the best you can to satisfy these new requirements.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question here that popped up on the, and that is, how many or what's the infrastructure requirements for Pinpoint? For the edge.
What's the first part?
Infrastructure requirements for the Edgefinity Pinpoint.
Yeah, so for the Pinpoint, it's you need one, and we support a number of these active RFID companies. There's different manufacturers out there. So like at our office here, which is a little over 3,000 square feet, we have 5 what are called anchors, and they're just, actually there's one behind me, you can't see it. They're about this big. We have 5 of those throughout, one in each corner, one in the middle of the office. And that's really it. So those handle the tracking of these active tags, along with all the sensors and all that other stuff. So that's the major, I would say, investment. And I'm trying to think, just to throw a number at you, that would probably be like $2,500 probably for the hardware, maybe $3,000 for the hardware here in this office. And what I like to say is like it's just the beginning, right? Because once you have that infrastructure, you can add as many of these RFID or these passive ultra wideband tags as you want, right? Even though they're $60+ each, but you can start by tracking individual things like I just did, right? Just put it on your regular barcode reader and walk around with it and know where things are. That was exactly what I showed. If you have higher valued assets, you can put these on it, and you can be tracking assets or people dynamically, right? And you can just build on it. So there's no more infrastructure or hardware costs involved. So I think I answered his question.
Yeah, that was the question. Kevin, I believe you are on. I've been trying to reach you. I don't know, can you hear? I mean, can you talk? It looks.
Yes, I can.
You can. Oh, very good, Kevin. All right. So my
Hey.
question is for you. What do you think customers have to do first? What's the first thing they should do to be ready to respond to the new challenges of this challenging economic environment?
For me, Sheldon, I mean, that's an excellent question, and I agree with a lot of the panelists that have already addressed that question. But for I think most customers, it would be the opportune times, as you mentioned, with some things that are in play, that maybe there's some available downtime that they have to reassess these processes that they're currently challenged with, and look for ways to, again, implement technology that's going to provide return on investment and give them the visibility to these products within the supply chain.
Very good. Thank you. Alex, question for you. Do you see any consolidation that in the IT world that our attendees would need to know about in terms of any hookups or breakups, or I mean, like you had that great slide that showed who stayed on the S&P and who left the S&P. Is that true also in the IT space?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect that we'll see a big shakeup here. You know, especially if this thing keeps going on. I think we've been coming out of a great period in IT, right? Ever since probably 2010, as we came out of the Great Recession, and it's been growing amazingly for the last 12 years. So I think we were kind of due for a little bump. You know, when I look at the venture capital funding, it's been pretty strong the last 2 years. It started to kind of decline at the end of 2019. So some people were kind of reading the tea leaves and thinking, well, you know, this is probably the end of an era, right? You start to see venture capital start to go down, and some of these kind of hairy tech startups that had kind of crazy business models were starting to let their people go in Silicon Valley and in New York City and other places like that. So, you know, I think these things are all kind of aligning, and I think we'll see a pretty big shakeup in the IBMI space. I would imagine some of these vendors that are run by people who've been around, you know, 30 years or so, they're probably already looking for an exit strategy, and I think this will probably encourage them to look a little bit harder. So I'd be surprised if we didn't see that, but I haven't seen it really starting a lot yet. I think people are still in a holding pattern, but you know, in the months to come, I think we'll see it accelerate.
Okay.
Maybe
Yes.
CYBRA will be one of the companies that's you know, buying up some of the struggling vendors. Huh?
You know, maybe the unicorn lives in Yonkers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Terry, how long do you think we've got a foggy period? You have a crystal ball? What do you think?
How long will we have a what? I'm sorry, it was a little garbled.
A foggy period. You know, what's the clarity? When will you get clarity?
Well, you know, we were actually discussing this internally, and I was discussing this with a couple of my partners, our larger partners. And we really believe, I can't put a date on it, but it's no time soon. It's probably early to mid 2021 at the earliest. I don't anticipate any kind of normal until then, and I don't think that even normal will be normal as we've known it. So it's going to be a while before we can we can look and see, okay, we have a regular sales cycle, we have a regular implementation cycle. We have a regular testing cycle where we have personnel, where customers have personnel in place to do POCs, where customers have personnel in place to actually drive pilots or large-scale piloting. I think we're going to bleed off into spring of next year. I think at the earliest. I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's the way it looks to me, and from sources around, I think that a lot of folks feel that way.
Thank you. Jonathan, it seems to me like it's almost it's a situation of extremes. On one hand, you have the retail brands who are, it's obvious, going to be going through some tough times to get the people back in the stores. See, J. Crew just filed for Chapter 11 this week. And on the other hand, you have the food, the grocery industry can't keep the product on the shelf, and you have products like yeast, which is, the sales are up 576% or some ridiculous number like that.
Are you saying that the yeast is rising, or?
Very good. Yes, the yeast is rising.
Thank you. That's my contribution.
So Jonathan, right? So here you have two completely divergent business cases, and is that basically the like illustrative of the challenge?
Just to comment on that, you're seeing, stating the obvious here, you're seeing the whole industry being shaken up. Companies that have e-commerce-based solutions are able to leverage that. That's something, you can't build the plane while you're flying it, though. So if you already had any type of foothold in that space, then great. And if you don't, then, it's kind of do or die, honestly. You have to get in there. And that's why I was saying the first thing you have to look at is your data. How do I get into this? How do I pivot into a workable distribution network for my product and get people in motion, if you will. And yeah, like has probably been said earlier today, certain companies are doing incredibly well, and certain programs are continuing to move forward. Major retailers with RFID programs are continuing to do it. Major retailers who are just ramping up RFID are still ramping up RFID if they've gotten over the initial hump of communicating with vendors, if you will, and they're marching forward with that. So yeah, it's I don't know if I'm really adding anything you don't know about this, but just the obvious need to pivot and be able to meet the consumer in a whole new channel.
Very good. I thank you all. Thank you for taking time. I thank our attendees. They had great attendance with a tremendous engagement. Excuse me, they were very attentive. Any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for joining us, and let's stay safe.